Too Young to Be a Mum is a very brilliant but very frustrating book from Maggie Hartley. This is a foster care memoir that was originally released in 2017. I would have read it for the first time maybe 2018, 2019. Reading it again, I actually could remember a decent amount about this one. There are some foster care memoirs that I reread, and even though they're great, I can't remember much of it. But this one I remembered quite vividly, and I think that's largely because I remembered how frustrating some of the characters were. I say characters because with foster care memoirs, they are based on truth, but they are heavily modified to protect the identities of the people involved. And this is a really interesting story. Normally, I'm not that bothered about the mother and baby placements with foster care memoirs, partly because I find that babies are just, they don't make the most interesting subjects for foster care memoirs because they don't do very much. Whereas if you've got a child who's got behavioural problems or a traumatized past, it's quite interesting to read about. But if the parent is a very interesting individual, it can be quite gripping. And this is absolutely what we get with Jess here, who is a 16-year-old girl who's given birth, I think, 3 days ago at the time when this first began. And because she's living with her boyfriend in really terrible conditions, she somewhat reluctantly agrees to go and stay with Maggie. And it's actually just Jess that Maggie is fostering. She's not actually fostering baby Jimmy. But Jess still has to prove that she can be a good mother. And it's very clear from the beginning that Jess loves her baby. She wants to be a mother, she wants to care for her child. And what's also quite different about Jess compared to, and I think this goes to show stereotypes, but compared to most foster carer books that deal with mother and baby placements, she doesn't drink alcohol, or at least not, it's not a problem. And she doesn't smoke, as far as we know. So that's quite unusual because I've read multiple foster carer books that deal with mother and baby placements, and most of them involve young teenage mothers who'd rather be out partying than looking after their baby. That's not the case with Jess. The only issue that Jess has is her youth and the fact that she was brought up pretty terribly, so has never had a good mother figure or a good parental role model. So while she wants to do the right things for baby Jimmy, she doesn't necessarily know how. She's also very devoted to her boyfriend, and there are times when she'd rather be with him than look after her baby because he provides her with family and comfort and reassurance, and there's only so much of that a newborn baby can give. So this story is actually all about helping Jess learn to be a good mother, and the baby's father is in it quite a lot as well, which was quite nice to see. But no matter how much Jess wants to do the right thing, her social worker doesn't give a toss. And that is so frustrating. And thankfully, Maggie feels the same way. It's not just me reading it and getting annoyed at somebody in authority. This woman is so frustrating and so infuriating. She had this disgusting attitude where from the beginning she was looking at adoption for Jimmy and was basically just saying it's a matter of time before Jess fails, let's just go through the motions and get Jimmy adopted as quickly as possible. And that's horrendous. The key thing about social services in the UK is that they will never separate a child from its parents if they don't have to. If there are ways of making it work with the parents, that's what they want. And social services in the UK has a really bad rap. Most people, think that they're there to separate families, to take children away, but they'll only do that if the child's in danger or if it's in the child's best interest. And with this, the only issue again was Jess's youth and them living in a pretty bad situation. But in terms of caring for Jimmy, there weren't any issues. She just needed education and support, but her social worker didn't really care to see that. So it's very unclear what's happening. There are several things stacking against Jess and Jimmy, but also Jess does make some bad decisions. It's not as if it's all great things from her and just her social worker causing problems. So the point I'm trying to make in a very roundabout way is that it's unclear where this narrative is going. And just when we think things are going in the right direction, something else happens. And at one point, Jess makes a horrendous decision. And I can't say what it is without spoiling it, but you will know exactly what bit I mean when you get to it. And I just thought, what an idiot. and it's all about desperation. And I'm not saying what they did was excusable, but if their social worker had been on their side and actually worked towards giving Jimmy his loving family life that everybody wanted, it wouldn't have happened. So while I don't necessarily think I can outright blame the social worker, I'm going to. It's an incredibly gripping read, and as I said, I could remember quite a lot of it from the first time I read it because it stuck with me, and it's very unpredictable, very moving, and unfortunately, I feel like a situation that a lot of young parents will be in where they don't know how to parent because they've never been parented, and what they need is support, not a nasty, selfish social worker fighting against them. But thankfully, these cases where the social worker is horrendous seem to be few and far between, at least based on the memoirs that I've read. Really enjoyed this. If you're new to Maggie Hartley's books, it's as good a place to start as any. Um, but I do recommend reading them chronologically, in particular because there's a child that Maggie is fostering, Lily, and there are some developments with her story within this one, and that will hit more emotionally if you've read about Lily in previous books. But it's not necessary to read them chronologically. But I really enjoyed reading it a second time. If I ever read it again, I'm pretty sure I'll enjoy it a third time as well. Definitely, apart from some grammatical errors that really annoy me, um, those aside, it's a really well written story and one that I definitely recommend.